All right, well, hello and welcome to the Indiana Farmers Market Community of Practice webinar, Courageous Conversations, Confrontation Without Conflict. I am Christina Ferroli, the Grants Program Coordinator for the Indiana Cooperative Development Center. With us today, we have Charlotte Westerhaus-Renfrow, who has a master's in education and a law degree and is an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Management and Business Law, Dean Faculty Fellow, and the Faculty Chair of Undergraduate Programs at Kelley School of Business in Indianapolis, where she teaches business law, negotiations, team dynamics, leadership, diversity in organizations, and cultural intelligence. Charlotte is an Indiana University bicentennial professor, a title earned by only 24 other faculty in the Indiana University system. In addition, Charlotte is a co-recipient of the Charles Vance Chancellor Community Scholar Award, the Evening MBA Teaching Excellence Award, the Otison Teaching Award, the IUPUI Athletics Favorite Professor Award, won twice, and the Indiana Bicentennial Medal for the extraordinary service and impact she has had at Indiana University and its communities. Charlotte has dedicated much of her career speaking and providing meaningful counsel to businesses, nonprofits, and educational institutions on how to create innovative and inclusive cultures. Charlotte has her JD from the Maurer School in Bloomington and earned her BS in journalism and MED from Ohio University. I want to remind everyone to please remain muted during the presentation. And you may drop your questions in the chat, or if you have a burning question and like Charlotte to answer you, please use the icons and raise a little hand and we'll get to you and have you ask your question. Also, you may have to print the conflict management style assessment tool that was emailed to you earlier this morning to complete the assessment. So thank you and welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you, Christina, for that fantastic introduction. And indeed, I do feel very, very welcome and excited to be meeting with you today. Now, before we get started, one of the things I really like about your organization is, yes, I am an avid participant or shopper at farmers markets. My parents are from a southern state. They raised me in Cleveland, but they were raised in southern states. And it used to embarrass me so bad, but we had always had a huge half-acre garden in the city at our house. And so for me, the idea of going to the farmer's market, and if you're anywhere in Cleveland, it's called a West Side Market back in the day when I was a child. It was humongous, what you call a farmer's market there. And that's where we got all our fresh fruits, our vegetables, our meats, our jellies, and our jams. And so I'm a real advocate, and I now live in a part of Indianapolis where I have lots of shade trees, and the only thing I can grow is hostas, and the only thing I attract is deer. So one of these days I'm gonna go out and get me a half acre, and but until then I'm gonna be frequenting many of the fantastic farmer markets that are in the area. So let's go ahead and get started. And I love your logo. I had to put it on the front page. It's very vibrant. Not only the vegetables, the honey, the flowers, all of that. Yes, I really liked it a lot. Now, before we go into the courageous conversation, the conversation part, let's start with courage. The key to courage. And I am going to just ask a few questions of you, but first, let me do this. I'm going to do this very quickly. What do you think of, or who do you think of when you hear the word courage? Usually what comes to mind, if we're not thinking about someone, of course, in our family, we think of heroes. Folks that through their courage changed politics, nations, saved lives, did something significant that had a huge impact on a great amount of people. You look up there on your screen to the left, Nelson Mandela, who and being in prison for almost half or more of his life, came out and ended apartheid. We've got the pilot who actually took a plane and landed it. And one way, someone said it was a 1 in almost 1.2 million chance he was going to land that plane in the river, I think the Hudson River outside New York, and yet he did it. Mother Teresa, same way, someone extremely peaceful, working in adverse conditions in her country of India, full of disease, saving people, firefighters who continually run into the face of that they know if they don't go in, people will die, and actually has the real prospect of killing them, but they do it to save lives. I think Amelia Earhart, I don't go anywhere without my phone and my MapQuest, right? But she went into a plane and would fly over oceans without any idea as far as a map, and all she had was a compass. And she did it when basically there weren't any women or female role models. Courage. We think also, if we go back in the history of our country, the aftermath of 9/11 and what happened in New York City, and the individuals who were common citizens, not to mention the paramedics and firefighters who saved lives and also perished, but common citizens helping each other out. And finally, let's think about what's going on right now in the wave of this pandemic. So many frontline workers, whether they be in the medical profession, whether they be teachers. I actually saw a special last night on a news broadcast where police officers, a great number of them are dying because of their being first responders in the era of COVID. Yes, when we think of courage, we think of a lot of people, but here's the question for you. Let's bring it on home. Let's bring it to what you're probably doing right now. How courageous are you at work? And I'll do a little bit of a poll, a very quick poll. And you can go into the chat, and maybe I'll check the chat out here in a minute and see who responds to this poll. But I'm going to ask you this quick question. Who is more courageous? And now I think I will go into the chat. I guess I will. Who is more courageous? Oh, it says here, the slides did not load. Are you saying that, Christina?
Yeah, for some reason, it says resume slideshow.
Okay, let me just stop right now.
Just refresh or.
Okay, I'm gonna stop. Let me stop the share. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm glad you caught me.
No,
Let's go into, just a minute here. No, that didn't work. We will get this. Okay. Can you see that?
No.
Good. Okay, let's do this.
They were up before.
And then they stopped?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's see what we're gonna do here.
You should be able to share.
I'm gonna do it now. Let me share the screen. And it's not there, which means I'm going to open it again. Just one sec. Let's open. Let's go like this. We're going to go to slideshow, concurrent slide. Let me go here. Share screen. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. And let's see. Let's go to. And are you seeing the full screen or the slides on the side?
The full screen.
Fantastic. So let's see if we can catch up. Well, now the full screen, is the full screen moving?
Nope.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, just a second. Before it's moving on my side, let me just go here. So one more thing.
There we go. No, now you're on panel.
No, now you're on panel. Let me see here. Okay, let's try one more time. Let's do this. Okay, what do you see now?
Oh, just a second. I'm trying to.
Do you see it? Do you see it now?
Let me see. Yes.
Is it moving when I go like
Oh,
this?
yes, it is. You're good now.
Okay, very good. Not sure what happened, but you know what? Sometimes Zoom can play some tricks on you. Thank you for your patience out there. Okay,
Yeah, we're
quick
good.
question. Very quick question. Out there among you, and you can go in the chat to answer this. Who of you is more courageous? Are you more courageous? Or are your coworkers more courageous? So if you out there, and are you seeing the full screen here now?
I see the slide deck on the side, but
Okay, we're
it's
not
fine.
supposed to have that.
Well, it works. You can leave it. It's fine.
Well, let's see if we can do it now. I wonder why that's doing that.
It just advance this way. It's fine.
Okay. Anyway, are you more courageous or are your colleagues more courageous? And that's the question we want to be able to answer here. Who is more courageous? Well, I'm going to go here and tell you something. And anyway, did we get a chance? Oh, the chat is lighting up. Let me see. Coworkers. Who is more courageous? Coworkers. Beth, you're right. It depends. But if you had to guess, Gina, I should say Beth is right. Who is more courageous? I'm leaning, that's what she says, but I'm leaning towards, well, I'll tell you really quickly who is actually more courageous and what research shows. And this is what research shows. And I'm going to try to do it like this so you don't see as much as the screen. There we go. On average, research shows that employees think they're more courageous than their coworkers. And the research is done on employees. That's what we do in business. We do research on individuals in business. So 74% of employees think they're actually more courageous. So if that's the case, you might be asking yourself, so why are you here? Why do we actually have this particular presentation? Why are you here? If you truly believe you're more courageous, why even have this workshop? Well, here's the reasons why. And once again, I'm having difficulties. Let's do this. There we go. Why are you here? Well, you're here because, to be quite honest with you, the three hardest conversations we face in our lives are work-related. The three hardest conversations that you have are at your job, and they deal with these things. Research shows for the average worker, all right, the hardest conversations, 33% of them have to do with salary. Whether you have to ask for a salary increase or whether you have been asked to give one. These are hard, courageous conversations. 31% of employees surveyed in a national survey said the hardest conversations is dealing with inappropriate behavior from your coworkers. Very difficult conversations to have, even though you may in fact think you're more courageous. And then finally, and all these are really close together, a third of the average workers believe that when you have to either give or receive poor feedback on job performance, that is a stressful situation and it needs a courageous conversation. Now, what happens when people have these courageous conversations? Well, there is a huge emotional toll. There is stress, there is anxiety. Even just knowing the conversation is coming up, 66% of these same American workers said they feel stressed even before they even have the conversation. And then that is why many of them shy away from having the conversation. The anxiety and stress prior to having it. Hey, why do we shy away from these conversations? Well, it makes perfect sense. The number one reason that we shy away from these conversations, number one, research shows, is fear. And what are the main causes of fear? Main causes of fear. What are those causes of fear? Well, for the most part, and this is the same average American worker, not knowing how the other person will respond causes a lot of stress, causes us to shy away from having courageous conversations, 43%. Then there's the issue of communication. 31% of the workers out there, they're really worried about, am I able to get my point across to the person I'm having this courageous conversation about, whether it be about pay, inappropriate behavior, or feedback on the job. Another area where people are causes people to be fearful is, I don't want to be in a confrontational situation. How many of us get up in the morning and say, wow, I can't wait to go to work and have a conversation with a colleague, and it's going to be confrontational? This causes us to shy away from those difficult conversations. And another thing that causes us and causes a lot of fear is we don't want to get upset or emotional, and we don't want the other person to get upset or emotional. That is tied almost with not being able to get the point across and being in a confrontational situation. And finally, we don't want to get upset once again, and we don't want the other person to get upset. If you put those two percentages together, the vast majority of folks have a lot of fear, and it has a lot to do with emotions. So how can we stop this? How can we stop all this fear and have a constructive, courageous conversation? Well, first, let's define what is a courageous conversation. And Christina mentioned I have a law degree. So what I always try to do is to make sure that I give foundational definitions, so we're all on the same page for this particular workshop. A courageous conversation is a discussion between two or more people. Two or more people. You can't have this conversation just with yourself, where number one, the stakes are high. So this workshop is going to be dealing with those conversations you have with another person or more, where the stakes are high. And you know going into this conversation that opinions are going to differ, that people are not going to perhaps agree with you. And third, a courageous conversation. Stakes are high, opinions will differ, and strong emotions are present at the onset or before the conversation. And finally, strong emotions are happening during the conversation. This is a courageous conversation, okay? Now, how can you have this conversation that, knowing for the most part what people will deal with is conflict? That conflict is where individuals' opinions differ. So you're having this courageous conversation when there is conflict, disagreement. And most importantly, what this conflict, and please focus on this, conflict is where there's a disagreement through which parties involved, and the key word is perceived. They perceive a threat. Maybe they don't even know if a threat is there, but because opinions differ, they perceive that there's going to be a threat to three things: their needs or your needs, their interest or your interest, their concerns or your concerns. A threat to a need is something that typically is quantifiable. It's what you really, really want. All right. And you think there's going to be a disagreement that I want one thing and the other party wants something else. Now, an interest, a perceived threat to an interest, is a threat to why you want it. And this is really where conflict comes in. Why do you want what you want? Typically drives those emotions. You're afraid that the why won't be satisfied, and or there's a threat to your concerns or their concerns. Now, I'm going to go through what I call a typical courageous conversation. You decide, I'm going to have this courageous conversation, and you want to start out nice. You start out nice, you really planned it, and then you get past the greetings and you get into the courageous part, the part where it's conflict. And then because of that, it starts to turn fierce, okay? And this is how it goes, okay? Let's start with a small print here. You start the conversation like this: what's wrong here? Can we just get along? And the other person says, well, you know, no big deal. I should just let it go. There's no need to make a fuss. Well, then you respond saying, and this is where we start, still courageous, I was kind of hoping it wouldn't come to this, but I guess I better speak up before it gets too late. Uh-oh. Before it gets too late, what does that trigger the other person? Emotions. And they respond, well, look, before I hear what you have to say, I'm going to talk. May I be totally honest with you. And then you come back in your emotions and you say, wait a minute, thanks for sharing your perspective, although you haven't heard the perspective. You're saying now, may I share mine? Getting a little fierce in here. The other person says, well, let me start by telling you where I'm coming from on this. And then I want to hear from you. What's the response? I know it's going to hurt, but I don't know how else to tell you this. And anytime you hear, I don't know how else to tell you this, you know you're getting emotional. You really ought to know. The other person says, okay, I have to be brutally honest here with you. Brutally honest? Uh-oh. And then finally, hey, look, I'm just saying what's true. If you can't handle it, that's your problem. And by the way, we haven't had a conversation. There's been perceived threats all over the place. No one has shared what is wrong and what is going on. And at that point, you have this, a huge explosion, the relationship blows up, it's atomic. And that's why people actually veer away from or fearful of having courageous conversations. So I'm going to go through a series of slides and talk to you on how to facilitate and engage in courageous conversations where there are really strong feelings, there are differences of opinions, right? And emotions are high. Now, first thing I'm going to ask you to do in this is you got as an attachment from Christina, your conflict management style. And I would say this is your conflict management preference. Your conflict management preference. And if I could, just for a second, I'm going to ask you all to do something, okay? If you have a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper, I want you to use it. And even if you don't have a pencil or pen, I want you to use your finger and I want you to do this. Sign your name. Just sign your name on a piece of paper, like you were signing a contract. In the old days, we used to have checks. Just sign your name. And if you don't have a piece of paper, use the hand that you usually use to sign your name. Are we all doing that? Give me a hands up, give me a thumbs up. Are we signing our name out there? Thank you, Lindsay. I like that. Thank you. Just sign your name. Now, take that pen or your finger or your hand and move it to the other hand and sign your name. Use the other hand, or if you're using your hand, sign your name. Now, typically if I was there in person, I'd be hearing groans and moans and head shaking. Seriously, you know you did it, Jenny. Did you feel comfortable when you switched hands? No. Did you really like how it felt when you switched hands? No. No. Now, did you like how it looked when you switched hands? No. Jenny says thumbs down. And that is really, EPC, I like that face, thank you. Anyway, that is really, now I gotta figure out where I was on the slideshow here. I'm gonna go back to the slideshow here. There we go. That is really the gist of a preference. A preference is what you do when you don't even think about it naturally. So when we go through these 5 preferences in conflict management, it's like being right hand or left hand. If you had your natural preference, your way, and it's built on your predisposition, it's built on how everything from values, how you're raised, your personality. But if you had your way to handle a courageous conversation, what style would you use? And what styles make you uncomfortable, especially if the other person is using that style? Okay. So the very first style that comes up on that assessment you have is accommodating. There are some of you all who are a natural teddy bear. A natural teddy bear. Now, accommodating folks, and actually I call this the Hoosier persona. We are known in Indiana for being accommodating and being very much into hospitality. And what teddy bears do is they ignore their needs and they resolve conflict by focusing on the other person's needs. Okay. They give in to others. They're not very assertive. They're very cooperative. They win the relationship and they lose whatever is the nature of the confrontation. Now, teddy bears, just like all teddy bears, are wonderful to have, because who doesn't want to be around somebody who wants to maintain great relationships? However, if you're having a confrontational, or I should say a courageous conversation, if you need to have a courageous conversation, this conversation for the teddy bear will probably not be very productive because they're always giving in. And if a person has a different style, they may take advantage of the teddy bear. Okay. Now, you may be, and I like this style because it's not me, not by nature. I wish to say this, a collaborative negotiation style is a preference for basically finding win-win solutions. You focus on the goals and the relationships. Now, I just admitted to you that naturally, I'm going to talk to you about, I'm competitive. We're getting there. Naturally, if I had my way, I'm competitive. But if you are going to be excellent at having courageous conversations, you have to be right-hand, left-handed. In other words, I have to learn when and how to be collaborative, because that might be the best strategy, the best confrontational management style. Now, the advantage from being collaborative, and we all need to be collaborative to be the most successful in courageous conversation, even though that may not be our preference, is that both sides get what they want. But the disadvantage is this takes a lot of time. It does. And it takes both parties agreeing to be collaborative. If the other party is not going to be collaborative, if the other party is going to be competitive, this won't work. So this takes a lot of upfront, before the conversation, the very courageous conversation, to build trust. But if both parties can agree to be collaborative, you usually will expand the options to have a great conversation, and basically actually don't need courage, because you'll have a win-win. The next style is the competitive style. And I said, I admit, if I had my way, I'm competitive. I love sports. By nature, yes, I'm a shark. I admit it, I'm a shark. There's some good things about having sharks on your team. It's good to be competitive. It's the American way, actually, especially in business. Sharks put relationships, however, at the lowest priority. And in business, that's not always good, especially if you have to work with these individuals on a day in, day out basis. The sharks have a need to win, almost at any cost. They come across as being autocratic, authoritarian, and uncooperative, threatening, intimidating. Now, there's advantages to having sharks in courageous conversations. And sometimes if you have a certain rule, for instance, somebody has to be at work on time, there really can't be no collaboration. You may have to be a shark in that confrontational situation. So if your decision is right in being competitive, then this is the best way to go. But remember, if you're a shark all the time in every courageous conversation, no matter, all right, your goal, you might breed hostility and resentment towards you in the workplace. And finally, there's this other style here, and this is called avoiding. And we all know folks like this. Oh no, we're not going to have a conversation. Not at all. No conversation. I hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. I really am going to avoid any kind of confrontation that takes courage or potential confrontation. Now, there's an advantage sometimes to be a turtle. Sometimes you really want to maintain the relationship at all costs, so you walk away. And there's some confrontations, maybe you should walk away. It may not be worth the risk. But the disadvantage is if there's real conflict there that needs to be resolved, somebody's coming to work late all the time, and you avoid, all right, that courageous conversation, that person will continue to come to work late. And to be quite honest with you, you won't gain a lot of respect. Even when you try to go back and have a collaborative conversation or competitive conversation, the person just walks away because they know that by nature you avoid. So I'm going to go with this particular screen, and this is the screen, and I know you have a PDF of this, and Christine has it. I try to tell folks if there was any PowerPoint slide that I would keep and put away in a drawer somewhere, this is it. It's good to know what your style is. You now know what your style is, but it's even better, I think, for you know when to use it or when to use another style. So I'm going to show you really quickly this matrix that can help you in learning how and when to use the styles. We didn't go through compromise. Compromise is usually a person who likes to go 50-50. So when should you use the style? Well, if you look at this quadrant here, on the left side, you see the importance of the relationship from low to high. On the bottom, okay, going horizontally, you'll see the importance of the outcome, low to high. So in trying to select a strategy or a management style, and you need to prepare this before you go into the courageous conversation, there's two things you need to think about. How important, number one, how important is this relationship to me and the other person at the end of this conversation? How important is it? Very, very important or not important? Number one. Then number two, as you prepare for this courageous conversation, you think to yourself, how important is the outcome? And then you jot that down. How important is the relationship? How important is the outcome? Now, using this quadrant here, if the relationship at the end of this conversation, courageous conversation, if it's not important to you at all, and you really don't care, very low importance on the outcome of this conversation, it may be a good idea to avoid it. I mean, you don't have a relationship with the person and you don't want to, and you really don't care about the subject matter you're going to talk about, and neither do they. Well, why even have this conversation? Okay, that's not a courageous conversation. That's an unproductive one. Next, you think to yourself, well, wait a minute, this relationship, Charlotte, is extremely high. At the end of the day, I have to work with this person. I want to have a good working rapport and relationship. And you know what? The outcome is not as important to me. It may be more important to them, but it's not important to me. If that is the scenario, then you are going to use the accommodating conflict resolution or strategy for your courageous conversation. You're going to actually lose the outcome, give up something on the outcome, because you're working to win and maintain a good relationship. Okay? That's when you want to be accommodating within that courageous conversation. Now, what if you say, well, the relationship is extremely high to me at the end of the day, at the end of this conversation, and the other person wants to have a great relationship. And we both want to have a good outcome. That's when collaboration works up here with the wise old owl. This is a win-win. We win the relationship and we win the outcome. It takes a little bit more time. It takes agreement from both of us, but that's the way to go on how we work through any conflict we have and have a courageous conversation. And then almost finally, if you really don't care about the relationship at the end of the day, think about the last time you bought a car from a stranger, or you sold a car to a stranger, or perhaps you bought or sold a house to a perfect stranger, not someone in your family or friend. At the end of the day, the relationship may not be as important as you're trying to work through who's paying closing costs, or how much money you have to put down, or what are you going to have when car as far as options. The relationship is not that important. You want the best deal, and the other party wants the best deal. Outcome is very important to you. The price is very important to you. Delivery is very important to you. Now you're going to want to be competitive. Okay? Now you're going to want to be competitive. And there are sometimes, even within the workplace, this is important. However, be careful. See where this arrow goes to Rob and Con? And there should be a little corner here in competitive called unethical. There's unethical behavior, become too competitive, not caring about the other party. And then there actually are things that are illegal. like robbing and conning. When someone calls you on the phone and says, I got a great deal for you, all you got to do is give me your social security number. They don't care about you. They just want a high outcome in your money. Now, in the middle here is compromise. You probably think that's a good strategy. It's good. It can be accommodating, collaborative. We can avoid. It actually might even be competitive, but be careful on a compromise. Only split the difference, okay, on something that's not going to cost you a lot if you're offering it. And only accept the split if what the half you're getting means something to you. So that's compromise. All righty. Are there any questions in regards to the strategies? I'm going to go here. Any questions? Okay, quick question. If for those of you who have a spouse or partner or even a child, and remember the good old days we used to go to a movie. What if that partner's spouse or child wanted to go to a movie and you really didn't want to see it, but you went anyway? I'm going to stop the share. What of all these styles would you be using? I'm going to go back to the share for a minute. Would you be using accommodating, collaborative, competitive, or avoiding? And you can put this in the chat. Okay. Let me see what I'm going to do here on the chat here. Okay, let's see what we got in the chat. It looks like accommodate. Oh, yeah. Christina, this is a smart group. Absolutely. If you're in my class, you all would have got 100%. Yes, you would use accommodating. But let me ask you another question. What if you did this time after time after time? You always gave in, right? Because you were losing what? Maybe 2 hours at a movie because you want a relationship with this person. But what if you finally did this and then you turn competitive? What do you think would happen? Let's say you're doing it with your spouse or your partner and you're accommodating just to go along. And then maybe after a year or two of these awful movies, you say, that's it, I've had it. I've always wanted to tell you, I hate these movies. I'm going to my movie. What would happen to the relationship at that point? I'm gonna stop sharing, go into the chat. What would happen to the relationship? Oh, I like that. If you choose a dinner, compromising. They would be mad at you. Yes, Laura. Remember that atomic bomb? Remember that? I need to establish some boundaries. Yeah, Rachel. It would likely hurt. No, it would actually, if you did this for a long time, it would do more than that. Would people actually trust you? Sometimes when we accommodate and all of a sudden we turn competitive, people are like, who are you? I thought I knew you. I thought you were accommodating. So what I'm trying to say with this is, it's great to be accommodating, but be careful. Be careful. Because if you're too accommodating in business and in relationships, and all of a sudden you have to be competitive, a person will actually not trust you as much. Sometimes it is good to actually work toward collaboration. And if you have to tell someone you got to be at work on time, and then all of a sudden the boss tells you, look, you're letting so-and-so slip. And the next day you say to the other person, well, I know I've been letting you come in to work late for the last 2 years, but now if you come in late, you'll get fired. Relationships are really ruined at that point. So be careful with accommodating. And I say that because accommodating is what most of us are actually, and a lot of us who are females especially, we are encouraged to be extremely accommodating. And then sometimes we have to be competitive and people really think, what is going on here? Okay, let's do this. Let's go with how good are you at reading people? Let's see how much time we have. Well, we got to run. So if reading people is this, and you're in a courageous conversation and you see this person, how many of you all think that she's happy with how the conversation is going? And how many of you all think she's not happy? So if you're happy, say happy. Not happy, say not happy in the chat. And let's see what's going on in the chat. She's happy, happy, happy. Well, yeah, happy, happy. Somebody said not happy. Oh, let me go back up. Let me see who said not happy. Ooh. Marissa, you are probably more right than wrong. And you know why? Look at her eyes. I teach negotiations. There's one thing that doesn't contract or contracts naturally when you smile, and that's your eyes. When you smile, unless you have a lot of Botox, and don't do too much Botox because nobody's going to trust you. When you smile and you really mean it, crinkles of your eyes will crinkle. Your eyes will sparkle. She is smiling, and there's nothing wrong with her smile. She may be smiling and let you know to continue talking. She may be smiling in order to be polite, but it doesn't mean she's happy, and it doesn't mean she is agreeing with you. So when you're having this courageous conversation, make sure you ask questions, even of the smiling face. That's tip number one, okay? Just ask questions and ascertain and make sure the person really is happy with how things are going, okay? And I know you've all seen this. If you've ever done it, you've seen your child or a partner, spouse, or friend, you've seen a picture of them where they were faking that smile. The reason you knew the smile was fake because their eyes gave it away. Okay, next. What about this person? How do you think the conversation is going for this person? Not so good? Well, if it's not going so good, what parts of the face tell you that the conversation is not going well? What do you see on his face can tell you it's not going well? You put that in the chat. Eyebrows, eyebrows, eyebrows. He looks worried. Forehead, he's losing the game. Yep, sweating. Yep. Yeah, this is a hand on the mouth. This is not, yeah, eyebrows lifted, covering. Now, it could be there's no air conditioning in the room. You'll need to check, raise eyebrows, the hand on the mouth. But obviously, even his glasses are even foggy. He's thinking, but his body is giving away, Rachel. He's thinking. His body is giving away potential clues of anger or disappointment, because the body temperature raises when we're angry. And if you look very carefully in his glasses, they're fogging up. And his face is a little red. And even for dark complexion folks like myself, when we get, the anger comes up, we get heated. That's what they mean by, are you getting heated? So this is a sign the conversation may be getting a little bit on the confrontational side. And then finally, what do you think about this young lady? How things going well in this particular courageous conversation? How many people think in the chat that things are going well? I like it, leaning toward, yeah, a little tense, you're right, focused. Yeah, very focused. Attentive. Smug. You know something? I like it. Complacent, competitive. This is the most difficult one to read. You know what? You all could be right. This is what I call the Mona Lisa. I teach my negotiators to use this because nobody can really get what you're thinking. And so once again, this is the one where you got to ask some more probing questions, make sure a person understands, make sure there's agreement. This is the best, what I call professional poker face. And I really do train people to use this in negotiations. All right. It also helps if you have to use it. If you're surprised, you don't show it. If you're confused, you don't show it. It is called what I call the Mona Lisa. So yes, once again, all the things you said could be all those emotions. So that's why you need to ask questions and maybe change your negotiation approach. Very good. Now, third, what do you do? Well, third, what do you really want? And we got to move it just a little bit as far as the next step. So 1, your style, you know your style. 2, you have to be able to read people. 3, know the negotiation, what it is you really want, and also know that what you want may come through and show in your emotions. Are you overly eager? You have to know, depending on what you really want, how does your body react? What happens if you're stumped and you can't get what you want? Conflict and courageous conversation, emotion is always there. Courageous conversations is an emotive sport. Sometimes your tensions tend to rule. The more you know about what you really want, the more you plan about what your strategy is going to be, the more you understand that you can be read based on your nonverbals, the better you'll be for your preparing for your negotiation. Next, okay, feedback. And this is the one we talked about in the very beginning. I think it was 31% type, or 31 or 30% of folks have the most fear, the most emotion, the most negativity when they think about giving or receiving feedback on a performance. So we're going to go there. Now, before I go into this, let's think about feedback this way. I try to pick pictorials on my PowerPoints that actually kind of display or represent that, yes, indeed, feedback does help us grow. But you have to be careful in your courageous conversation how you give that feedback, and you also need to be just as cognizant on how you receive that feedback. Okay. So let's start out with this. Even though we know that feedback is a positive thing and helps us grow, we basically, for the most part, avoid it. And that's what the research showed. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to give feedback in a courageous conversation, and then tips on how to actually receive feedback so the conversation is very, very productive. Okay? All right. First thing we want to do when you are giving feedback, all right, while you're giving feedback, is you clearly understand what is the problem. Take all emotions out of it. What is the real issue? Maybe this person has done things in the past that maybe have gotten you emotionally hooked or bothered, but is that the real issue? Okay. When you give feedback, you want to ground yourself, and this is you. Most people are like, Charlotte, tell me what to do for the other person, how I can control the other person. The first person you have to control in giving feedback is you. What gets you hooked? The other person may know it. Are there certain phrases that get you hooked? Is it when someone rolls their eyes, all of a sudden your emotions tend to go up? What are things that are bothering you and getting you hooked, and then you got to unhook or undetach those? I mean, when I'm giving feedback and someone rolls their eyes, I'm like, say what? No. If they roll their eyes, that's their problem. We have an issue to resolve in this courageous conversation, and I will not let that take me off track. Ground yourself. If you have any assumptions and you don't have all the facts, get rid of the assumptions. Any assumptions. Things like, I know this person is going to be able to take this courageous conversation well because they are such a strong person. They may be having an awful day, or something at home tragic has happened. Or really, you're making assumptions about how they're going to receive things. What are your emotions and why? Deal with your emotions before you work with others. Make sure you write down. I tell people to write this down. What is the purpose of this conversation? And plan, how will I start it? There's really nothing worse, I think, sometimes to start a courageous conversation with, how's the weather? This is not about the weather. I'm going to give you some tips too on how to do this conversation in the next slide too as well. I actually give you a script. And then finally, make sure you get a sense of, if I have this conversation, what do I want it to happen? What will probably happen? But maybe what will happen if I don't have it? And if the answer is very little, then you know what? Small relationship outcome, right? Small outcome, you need to avoid it. Now, how do we receive feedback? And the receiving feedback and giving feedback, I'm going to give you a scenario, and this is a value statement that'll help you with both. Both of these, as far as receiving feedback and giving feedback, will help. Once again, take a picture of this, save this slide. Research shows it works. When I coach individuals, they come back and tell me it works. I've had some of my clients use this on their 3 or 4-year-old child at home or grandchild, and they say it works. Write this down. 2 sentences. Articulate your values and giving and receiving feedback with 2 sentences. I am, or I believe, or I feel blank when you blank because, period. I would prefer that. Now, I will tell you why this is so important, these 2 sentences. Usually in a courageous conversation, we're really ready to tell the person what's wrong. So when I talk to my students, I'll say, I am distracted, and I believe you're being disrespectful when you come to class late. Because when you come in, the door slams, it makes a lot of noise, and my students and our student evaluations tell me that distracts their learning. That typically is where most people would stop. You tell the person what's the problem. But that's not a courageous conversation. A courageous conversation is when you tell the other party what you would prefer. Now you have action. So you tell the party what you feel needs to change because of why it needs to change. And then you say, I would prefer that if you come to class late, you sit in the back row and be as quiet as possible if there's a seat. And then you stop the conversation, stop what you're saying at that point, and then you listen. Once again, most courageous conversations turn fierce with just the first sentence. So what's the other party supposed to do? But isn't it all about you wanting to change the other party's either actions or beliefs? You want to actually give them a chance to diminish the conflict? You do that by giving them a choice of what you wanted. I would prefer that. This is a very powerful way of giving and receiving feedback. And additionally, when you receive feedback, make sure, and I'm going to go through the last 6 minutes with this, when you're receiving feedback, okay, please pay attention to triggers. We judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their actions. Make sure as you're listening to the feedback, you're actually listening to the feedback, all right, and not reacting to the emotions that are attached to the feedback, okay? Try to detach yourself from any internal triggers, lean in and listen. Also, too, when you're receiving feedback, we typically resist it. And this is where the courage comes in, or people say, I don't have the courage to do it because I don't think they're going to actually receive it. We resist feedback if we think it's wrong. That's natural. And we often take offense and get angry because we believe it's wrong. But see the questions on the right? This diffuses the emotion, and this truth trigger diffuses the emotion so you can listen more, maybe turn away from being more competitive to being more accommodating or collaborative. Ask yourself these questions, or 2 questions. Where is this feedback coming from? Is it coming from a real, quantifiable, demonstrative, something that, basically I did? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from someone who is been a supportive coach? Is it coming from someone who even knows the situation? If they don't know the situation, of course the feedback is wrong. But you ask yourself these questions. And then number 2, you ask, is it coming from a place of appreciation? Sometimes people will tell you or give you hard truth because they appreciate the fact that you might change. Another person may be giving you the hard truth and feedback because they're trying to coach you and help you grow. Or perhaps this is an evaluation and the only way you're going to grow is to know the truth. Understand the type of feedback and then ask clarifying questions like, where is it coming from? Is this appreciation? Are you evaluating me? Are you trying to get me to grow? Be sure you understand what the person is trying to tell you. And then most importantly too, understand the why, especially in the relationship. We also resist feedback. We think the person is giving it, they have questionable motives. We don't trust their motives and they lack credibility because they don't know the facts. So in those cases where you're resisting the feedback because of that, we think the person is doing it because their motives are questionable or they lack credibility. Ask these 2 questions. Maybe both of us have something. We've both done something at fault here. Maybe both of us have contributed to this type of feedback that is questionable or lacks credibility. So have I given any kind of input or my actions contributed to this feedback? And in the relationship type of trigger, make sure you're clear on your roles. Are you my supervisor? Are you my coworker? Are you my friend? Are you my colleague? All right. In this relationship, what are our roles? And are these roles inherently in conflict with one another? That's a deep one. Are they inherently in conflict with each other as far as the roles? All right. If someone is giving you feedback that's questionable, who's a coworker, what is their role in this? If it's someone who's your supervisor, what is their role in this? Is there conflict there? Very important question to ask. And then finally, a trigger that makes us resist feedback is when we feel attacked. And we feel attacked on a personal level. We're going to resist that feedback. Now, even when this happens, it's very important to control your emotions and notice how you're feeling. Put on that Mona Lisa smile. They're attacking you personally, but you cannot lose the ability to focus and think. You're reacting based on what we call the limbic part of your brain that's attached to your spine, and that's attached to emotions and feelings versus the frontal lobe. Separate your feelings, separate the story they're telling you, and separate any feedback that you're going to get from your emotions. This is where calm really comes into play. I don't know if you all are football fans. I'm a huge football fan, but back in the day when Tony Dungy used to coach the Indianapolis Colts and there was a bad call against his team, I never saw him lose his temper publicly. Never did. Now, those eyes could kill, I'm telling you, on the sidelines. But this is where you really have to pull yourself together when you're being personally attacked. Force yourself to consider the struggles of the person. Maybe the problem is them and not you. Have empathy. All right. Protect yourself with the truth, but don't let your emotions play into it. And then as we're coming towards the end, you need to stop and you need to listen. Feedback is one of the most difficult ways to have a courageous conversation, especially when you're receiving it. So you have to listen it through. Don't think about the reply before you even hear all of it. Listen. Mona Lisa face, watch for your nonverbals. Watch for the nonverbals. 86% of communication is nonverbal. So you've got to watch that and make sure you fully understand the feedback. Also ask, either in the beginning of the conversation or at the end of this courageous conversation, can you have the ability to ask clarifying questions? And I would call it clarifying questions. Not, I have some questions I want to ask you. I demand to be able to respond. And they'll say, I need clarity. Can you help me? I need clarity. Can you help me? And then finally, what about your comfort zone? Courageous conversations can be, and often are, uncomfortable. But that's the biggest opportunity for growth. And I use this picture because this is a real picture of a little plant that was in my driveway, or very much similar to it. Impatient was very similar to that. The little seed fell in the crack from the year before, a pot I had. And it grew and grew in a little crack. That little seed and that little plant was very uncomfortable, but it was determined to grow even in a tight situation. So yes, it is difficult, but it could be a great opportunity to grow. And then finally, honest disagreement is often a good sign of progress. Courageous conversations usually are great signs of progress. So I'll stop that now and give you all time to do questions, and also to say thank you for having me. I know I want to go in a minute over, and I'm sure some of you have to get back to work, but are there any questions? You all got courage now? Okay, Christina. Well, thank you. Oh, this was one. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All you all out there, you're quite welcome. I'm seeing some of the comments in the chat. You're quite welcome. It was oh my gosh. Gracias.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. This was fantastic. I think it's just what we needed to hear at the start of the new year too. So very appropriate to get us moving forward. Thank you again for participating and being our speaker on Courageous Conversations. And as always, this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And I just want to remind everybody to check our Facebook page, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and also look into our website. We just launched our website with the first of the year. So feedback's encouraged, and thank you all for participating. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.